Hi, Trevor here, reflecting on life through music. Thank you for stopping by. Well, coming again today, you're very, very welcome. I trust you enjoyed my last video from Australia, Little Heroes, and through their song, One Perfect Day, we looked at grief and loss. So I trust you found that one encouraging. Well, going from there to Richard Wayne Penniman, that was born in 1932 in Macron, Georgia. Now, this guy is a very, very significant, influential character in the world of rock and roll, being dubbed the architect, the creator of rock and roll. So this is how significant this guy is. He was 3 out of 12 children, and very much a church-going family growing up, but his father was getting involved in some bootleg on the side, and also owned a bit of a club. He was actually had a nickname Little Richard, and this is the guy we're talking about there today. And he had a bit of a deformity growing up of having one leg slightly shorter than the other. But he did grow up being influenced with gospel songs and gospel performers. It was around the age of 15, and in 1947, that Sister Rosetta Thorpe, who had a bit of a show, actually saw him performing one of her songs and said, "Hey, you know what, you've got a pretty good voice, could you please open my show for me?" Which he did. Moved forward to the Dr. Nabil's travel show, and he started to adopt some costumes, including turbans and capes. In 1949, the Hudson Medicine show, where he would perform consistently night after night the song Caledonia. It was around this time too that Little Richard was also starting to experiment with his stage persona and his stage presence, and he did perform in drag from time to time under the character Princess Lavon. It was actually in Buster Brown's orchestra that Little Richard would adopt the name Little Richard for his stage name. And it was when he actually moved to Atlanta that he started to get renowned for his flashy showmanship. This is one of the hallmarks of Little Richard as the architect of rock and roll, and very much not only the way that you do it, and you know, and we'll get onto some clips in a minute of the 12-bar blues, which Little Richard pretty much brought to the world, but not just through rock and roll, but also rhythm and blues. But he was starting to get known for flashy showmanship, playing around a bit with his live performance, and he was also starting to get noticed for having a very, very good singing voice. In fact, so significant that he would actually get signed to RCA Victor Records. Now, despite the fact that he was actually getting really, really well known on stage for his popular antics and all sorts of bits and pieces he was doing, the record sales weren't going that well. But this was going to change in 1955. Now, the world would change this particular year because Tutti Frutti, which is one of Little Richard's signature songs, was a song that's been dubbed to change rock and roll forever. In fact, this song was significant. It got to number 2 on the Billboard R&B charts, number 21 in the Billboard Hot 100, and 29 in the UK singles chart. So this song was a massive, massive, massive song for him. So we've got to have a couple of clips of this one. We go back to 1956 version, where he's looking, this is Little Richard back then, and move forward to 1995, and he's actually performing this one at the closing ceremony of an Olympic Games. And so you get to see the transition over 40 years from 56 to 95, and how iconically amazing Tutti Frutti was. The thing you've got to acknowledge, I think, about Little Richard, I think, as apart from his significance to the music, and to rock and roll, and to rhythm and blues, is just his attitude. You know, it's interesting in this world, isn't it, how, we have to have a certain attitude to carry ourselves. The way we walk into a room, the way we talk, the way that we may present something, the way we go for job interviews, and that's something that I'm involved in at the moment. The way that we are as human beings. Now, we go to a certain level, don't we, of where we think we can get away with. We think, well, if I could be at this sort of level and do this sort of thing and be this sort of way, it's going to get me by. But Little Richard would say no to that. He'd say, no, come on, you know what? Life is for the taking, life is for the making, life is for making the most of it. So I'm going to go further. And it's quite interesting that for people that tend to go further, they tend to go well, don't they? There's something, because they have a certain character, a certain way of carrying themselves that just enables them to have a bigger than life personality. And they become compelling forces of nature in many, many ways. And this guy particularly, he changed the world absolutely with his music. But he had a way about him that the world just responded to. Now, how we actually go from there to there is a little bit beyond me, but it's almost like a decision is made, hey, you know, I'm not going to be here anymore. I'm going to be there no matter what. Certain element of wanting it, I suppose, certain element of taking life giving life a bit of a shake and shaking it up a little bit. It's a bit of an opportunity also for us to really, really experience who we are as human beings by going a little bit wild, for the lack of a better word. I mean, Little Richard was the master of going wild, and it was this wildness that people flocked to see him. And it enabled him to make a really, really big influence on the world. He would keep this persona going for most of his lifetime. And it enabled him to really endear himself to the world. How we get from one level to another is a little bit beyond me, but there's got to be some level of keeping grounded, but also letting things fly a little bit, letting things go a little bit, letting things see where they go a little bit as well. Because if we just keep it safe, life may not necessarily go the way we want it to go. There's always got to be a little bit of a risk in there. There's got to be an opportunity for us to really work out what we're made of. And sometimes that might involve going into unknown territory, unknown places, and seeing where it takes us. Because, to quote Steve Jobs, he said, he talked about death as a destination we all share. So knowing that that's the end result, well, there's nothing to risk, because we all end up there anyway. So he lived this life in a way that enabled, he changed the world, absolutely, but he lived his life in a way that every day mattered. And this is the day and age of the way that we live. Do we live as if every day matters? I'm speaking to myself more than anybody else today, as we are in between jobs at the moment. Where's the next job going to come from? I don't know at this point. I have some hopes. I have some trusts, I suppose, about things that are going to work out. But what do I need to do in the meantime to get myself ready for this next stage? So Little Richard well and truly is a great example of what can happen when you actually take life by the scruff of the neck and give it a bit of a shake. And certainly back in 1955 with Tutti Frutti, this song changed rock and roll forever. And as you watch the two clips of this song below, just realise you're looking at an absolute legend powerhouse, absolutely. Move forward to 1956, and another single, Long Tall Sally, also did very, very well for Little Richard. This got to number 13 of the top 100, also selling like Tutti Frutti, 1 million copies. We've got a couple of live performances of this one, 1966 and 1996 below. It was around this time that Little Richard, who was getting very, very popular by this point, ended up getting a backing band and calling them the Upsetters. And it was around this time too that, like the 1950s, we still had segregation between black and white people in audiences. Little Richard was one of the pioneers to actually breach that gap, because he was a guy of colour, absolutely rocking up to people who were white. So Little Richard well and truly is a big part of the blending of audiences into one. In 1956, he would release 7 singles and across the US and the UK. But it was around 1957 that, due to a bit of almost a bit of a plane crash, actually, it really changed Little Richard's life. He thought he saw a vision from God at this point. He called it a God encounter. His life was pretty wild at this point too. He thought, well, actually, I might just rein it in for a little while, and he went off to study theology. But one of those singles in 1956, Good Golly Miss Molly, we've got a live version of this one at Muhammad Ali's 50th birthday of all places. And so enjoy that performance of Little Richard. They're mutual idols of each other, absolutely. So for the next 2 or 3 years, Little Richard will actually get involved in preaching, sharing the gospel of all things, but he would continue to release some gospel albums, which actually did pretty well in the charts. Enter 1960s, and Brian Epstein, the manager of the Beatles, was looking to get these four guys going, because he thought there was just something about these guys, and so he actually contacted Little Richard and said, hey, can you please let my four guys open for you? Which he absolutely did. And Paul McCartney was taught some distinctive vocal techniques by Little Richard, which well and truly informed his career. So Little Richard had a lot to do with the starting of the Beatles. That's how significant he was and is. In 1963, the Everly Brothers, Bo Diddley and the Rolling Stones were involved in a bit of a tour that was not going so well, and so enter Little Richard, who actually saved that tour from collapse. And because of that, he would actually get his own TV show, The Little Richard Spectacular. Now, we've got a bit of a studio performance in 1963 of A Whole Lot of Shakin' and Go On. We've got a studio version below. Believe it or not, in 1964, Jimi Hendrix actually joined the Upsetters before he went out solo. But there was always going to be a bit of a clash of the spotlight there. And after a little while, Jimi Hendrix was told to kind of go. And because of that, he went off and did his own thing, including the iconic Woodstock performance. In 1970, Little Richard would get signed to Reprise Records, and he would release the album The Real Thing, R.I.L. We got a live version of Freedom Blues below, and here you see his typical interaction with the crowd stuff that he does, and well and truly after the start of his career, he was still going at that point with Freedom Blues. Now, Little Richard, very significant character indeed. He embodied rock and roll, not just with his voice and the incredible croons and wails and screams that this guy brought into his voice, but also the image, the antics on stage, the fun on stage, all of the stuff you got to do to be a rock and roll showman. Little Richard well and truly embodied all of those characteristics. Responsible for such genres as gospel, blues, rock and roll, and even hip-hop to a certain extent. Very influential with the Beatles and glam rock. People such as David Bowie have cited Little Richard as a major significant character. As I said before, Tutti Frutti has been dubbed the sound that birthed rock and roll. He's in many lists, top 500 albums and song lists. Good Golly Miss Molly is another song that shaped rock and roll. And in 2023, he was number 11 of the 200 greatest singers of all time. There's been a stack of Hall of Fame nominations, just some of them. 1984, the Georgia Music Hall of Fame. 1986, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, one of the first to be inducted in that. 1990, he received the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. 2003, the Songwriters Hall of Fame. 2015, the Blues Hall of Fame and the Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame. Between 1957 and 2005, it's a bit hard to know the length of time of this discography, but 19 studio albums, 3 live albums, 36 compilation albums, 77 singles. Some of those 1950s albums, the singles did really well indeed. 30 million albums sold. Now, move forward. I just wanted to find another clip of Little Richard. 1972, we've got a live version of Rip It Up, just to show that all the way forward from when he started, he was still belting out the songs. Little Richard would unfortunately leave us in 2020, but he left an absolute legacy of what it means to be rock and roll, to actually emit, transmit, and embody rock and roll. Nobody did it better than Little Richard. So it's great to pay credence to this absolute legend in rock and roll today. So the links to those 8 clips from the description below. And I've also included my last video for the Little Heroes just for something completely different. So if you want to recap on them, feel free. Well, if this is your first time to Life Reflection True Music, or you've come back for another one, how great to see everybody here. Well, that's it for today. Next time we're going to get on to Lenny Kravitz. So until then, I'll catch you around. Bye for now.